Auzubillahiminash-shaytanir-rajim. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Today our topic is NIBOSH, International Diploma for Occupational Health and Safety Management Professionals, Unit ID 1, Part 2, No Workplace Health and Safety Principles, INT. NIBOSH, International Diploma for Occupational Health and Safety Management Professionals, Unit ID 1, Part 2. ID1 learning outcome 4, ID1 learning outcome 5, ID1 learning outcome 6, ID1 learning outcome 7, ID1 learning outcome 8. Contributors Zoe Nisham, BSc Honors, CM Ayush, Dip2 OS. ID1 Learning Outcome 4, NIBOSH International Diploma for Occupational Health and Safety Management Professionals. Learning Outcome 4. Once you have freed this learning outcome, you will be able to understand risk management, including the techniques for identifying hazard, the different types of risk assessment consideration when implementing sensible and proportionate additional control measures and developing a risk management strategy. 4.1 Hazard identification techniques. 4.3 Types of hazard identification techniques. 4.5 The importance of employee input. Managing health and safety risks. Today we discuss managing health and safety risk 4.2. Managing health and safety risk. In this section, explain the principles of implementing and maintaining a sensible risk management program. The meaning of the term sensible risk management. The concept of sensible risk management aims to balance the growing risk-averse attitude of society toward innovation and development. Consequently, taking a sensible approach to risk management involves ensuring that workers and the public are properly protected, enabling innovation and learning not stiffen, ensuring that those who create risk manage them responsibly and understand that failure to do so is likely to lead to robust action. Providing overall benefit to society by balancing benefits and risks with a focus on reducing significant risks, both those which arise more often and those with serious consequences. Enabling individuals to understand that as well as the right to protection, they also have to exercise responsibility. It is not about reducing protection of people from risk that cause real harm, scaring people by exaggerating or publishing trivial risks. Stopping important recreational and learning activities for individuals where the risks are managed, creating a totally risk-free society, generating useless paperwork, maintains, source, sensible risk management, health and safety executive, HS. The importance of applying proportionality when assessing and controlling risk. Health and safety at work legislation is about reducing death, serious injury, and ill health in workplaces. It is about taking the necessary action to reduce significant risk arising from work. However, in an increasingly risk-averse society, it often means simply banning activities. The health and safety professionals should be clear about what is a legal requirement rather than attempt to stop or limit an activity or assume that it will have undesirable or unattended consequences. The professional should therefore check whether the decision or the chosen precautions are proportionate by considering the actual risk. The health and safety professional needs to consider the actual risk of an activity. Managing health and safety risk. Understanding what the actual risk is involves considering the likelihood and consequences of something going wrong, and this means thinking about what type of incident and the decision, the precaution is intended to prevent, what injury or ill health could be caused, how likely it is to happen. Organizations should take on ownership of their risk and take proportionate steps to manage those risks so that attention is focused on the significant risks that cause injury and ill health and not the trivia or everyday low risk. Principles of different between qualitative, semi quantitative, and quantitative assessments. Before we continue, let's remind ourselves of the definitions of the following two terms. Quantitative, a measurement of magnitude is involved. There were four fatalities due to falls from height over a 12-month period or at distance x. The airborne concentration of formaldehyde in a workplace was measured as 13 ppm. Qualitative, no actual measurement is used. It involves describing the qualities. The airborne concentration was higher serious. The injury sustained was minor. There are conceptually two basic categories of risk assessment: qualitative and quantitative. In practice, there is also a third category which uses numbers to indicate rank order, called semi-quantitative. Qualitative risk assessment uses more rigorous techniques in an attempt to quantify the magnitude of the risk, even in the high hazard industries such as nuclear and chemical. Most of the assessments are not quantitative. However, they are often used to satisfy a regulator that very unlikely events, which if they occurred would have serious consequences not only to the organization but also to the public, such as loss of contaminant of radioactive material in a nuclear facility, have been assessed. All risk assessments involve at least some element of subjectivity or judgment. The definitions used below are based on those from HSE 190 preparing safety reports. Qualitative risk assessment. Qualitative risk assessments are based entirely on judgment, opinion, and experience, including approved guidance rather than on measurements. They use technology based criteria to establish if you have done enough to control risk. If I use this standard control measure, I'm pretty sure the risk will be adequately controlled. They allow you to easily prioritize risk for further action, but while they enable risk to be ranked against other risks, they do not objectively estimate a risk and so do not allow direct comparison with external estimates. A qualitative risk assessment is carried out by the risk assessor, making qualitative judgments with respect to the likelihood and consequence associated with the particular loss event. This judgment may be made through observation, and discussion with employees, as well as looking at other information such as accident records. There are various ways in which likelihood and consequence could be categorized. The following is a simple example. Managing health and safety rules examples. Consider a torn carpet in an office and the risk it creates. Before somebody could possibly trip on the carpet, they have to walk in the vicinity of the carpet. So the degree of exposure to the hazard is a key factor. If the carpet is situated in the center of a main walkway, then the likelihood of its causing an accident is much greater than if it is in a corner of a little used storeroom. There are a number of possible outcomes should someone trip on it. The severity categories might be minor, minor injury or illness with no significant lost time, such as slight cut or bruise. Lost time, more serious injury causing short-term incapacity from work or illness causing short-term ill health, e.g. broken limb. Major, fatality or injury, illness causing long-term disability. We use our experience to qualitative judge the most likely outcome. We need to be sensible here, otherwise we will end up with the worst possible consequence always being death or even multiple deaths, and the appeal to priorities remedial action is defeated as a result. In this example, the likely outcome could be that someone would be badly bruised with no significant lost time and therefore minors would be chosen. The likelihood of someone tripping over the carpet could be categorized by one of the following terms: very likely, likely, unlikely. In this example, we might judge that the likelihood of exposure to the hazard coming into contact with the torn carpet and subsequently tripping might be likely. Think of our earlier equation of risk magnitude. Risk is equal to likelihood and consequence. Likelihood or frequency, consequence or harm or severity. Risk is a combination of likelihood and consequences. It follows then that although no numbers are being used, it is easy to see that the risk of someone's injury themselves of the torn carpet is moderate. For this reason, remedial action must be carried out to minimize the risk, which in the short term might involve using carpet tape to join the two ends where there are a number of hazards that have been assessed in a similar way. Then it is possible to prioritize the remedial action so that the ones that pose a greater risk are resolved first. Clearly, each organization would need to come up with their own categories which reflect the type of injury that may occur along with their likelihood frequency. If the descriptors minor lost time, major are replaced arbitrarily with 1, 2, and 3 respectively, this is still a qualitative risk assessment since there is still no quantitative basic for the choice. Just a switch of numbers for words. So don't think that the mere presence of numbers somehow converts it into a more through quantitative assessments. Managing health and safety risk. Semi-quantitative in many risk assessments where the hazards are not few and simple, nor numerous and complex. it may be necessary to use some semi-quantitative assessments in addition to the simple qualitative assessments. This may involve measuring the exposure of a worker to a hazard, substances or noise, which can then be used to assess whether the risk to the workers are acceptable or not. Semi-quantitative risk assessments may also use a simple matrix to combine estimates if of likelihood and consequence in order to place risk in a rank ordered as order as shown here in a simple 3 by 3 matrix. Likelihood high, medium, low. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 2, 4, 6, 3, 6, 9. Consequence low, medium, and high. The likelihood and consequence are each characterized as low, medium, or high and are assigned a number 1, 2, or 3 respectively. The risk is determined by calculating the product of the likelihood and the consequence. So risk range from 1, low likelihood, low consequence, to 9, high likelihood and high consequence. The key point about such metrics is that they are used to rank risk, but put them in order. They have no meaning in terms of their relative sizes. So it cannot be assumed that a risk value of 9 is 9 times the size of a risk rating of 1. Quantitative risk assessment. Quantitative risk assessments, QRS, attempts to calculate probabilities or frequencies of specific event scenarios. This is sometimes mandated by legislation so that the result can be compared with criteria on what is considered an acceptable or a tolerable risk. They may use advanced simulation or modeling techniques to investigate possible accidents and will utilize plant component reliability data. They are sometimes referred as QRA or probabilistic risk analysis PRA. Definition: quantitative risk assessment. This is the application of methodology to produce a numerical representation of the frequency and extent of a specified level of exposure or harm to specified people or the environment from a specified activity. This will facilitate comparison of the result with specified criteria. The degree of quantification used is variable. This type of risk assessment typically uses advanced tools such as fault three analysis FTA and event three analysis ETA discussed in learning outcome 5. It relies heavily on having suitable data to calculate the probability or frequency of a defined event, QRA, or evidence-based use hard data to be as objective as possible. It may not be possible to fully quantify risk, especially for infrequent events, despite the name QRA invariable involve some subjectivity. This is because some broad assumptions may have to be made. In the application of human reliability assessment, this approach is used for safety causes to establish that the risks have been fully identified and to justify that enough has been done to reduce the risk to the lowest level reasonably practicable. Managing health and safety. QR is used in high hazard chemical and nuclear installation and in the offshore oil industry for specific risks scenarios, they are included as part of their safety report requirements. Quantitative methods are also used in setting workplace exposure limits (WEL) for airborne contaminants. For major hazard sites such as large chemical installation, numerical estimates of the probability or frequency of plant failure may be calculated. This is at its most valid when it involves the use of component reliability data. Simply because the data is available or can be measured and is often based on a large sample size and is statistically valid. The result of particular failure scenarios would then be considered. In terms of the different possible consequences, perhaps using fault trees and event trees, which may use component, structural, system, and or human reliability data. Consequence itself is not usually quantified as such. Rather, many failure scenarios, perhaps several hundred, all with different consequences, are modeled, and the probability or frequency of each scenario actually developing is calculated. An example would be the failure of a chlorine storage vessel in a particular way with dispersion, modeling of several different release patterns of a toxic gas cloud. In such cases, the likelihood of harm resulting from all the different potential causes of failure has to be rolled up into a single estimate of the risk from the installation. How to engage employees at all levels in the risk assessment process. The risk assessment process must be seen as a critical activity by all levels of the business rather than just as a tick box exercise. Without employee engagement, the process is set to fail and become a file full of paperwork rather than a safety critical process. Management must encourage the use of the process by not only acknowledging the need of the risk assessment, but actively engaging with the process and critically allowing time of time for risk assessment to be carried out. Ultimately, the completion of risk assessment will result in the need for additional controls in some areas which will require resources. Supervisors should be responsible for ensuring that the risk assessments in their areas remain up to date and reflect the process as it is carried out, rather than following the process to drift to the point that the risk assessments are no longer representative of the activity. Employees have a huge role to play in the risk assessment too, whether they are process experts, the people who carry out activities are in supporting roles such as engineering or maintenance. The engagement of employees at all levels is essential in order to make the process work effectively.